They called it impossible, a throwback adventure in an age of disco and space operas. But Raiders of the Lost Ark didn't just prove them wrong, it rewrote the rules of what blockbuster cinema could be. Behind every whipcrack and fedora tip lies a story of chaos, genius, and near-death experiences that almost killed the legend before it was born. From Harrison Ford's brutal injuries to Spielberg's secret filming techniques, these aren't just behind-the-scenes stories. They're the untold disasters that forged a masterpiece. If you're ready to discover the shocking truth behind Hollywood's greatest adventure, make sure you're subscribed, because we're about to crack open secrets that have been buried for over 4 decades. Number 20. The Beach Conversation. It all started with disappointment on a Hawaiian beach. Steven Spielberg had just been crushed, turned down from directing a James Bond film, his dream project slipping through his fingers like sand. But George Lucas, fresh off the success of Star Wars, had something else in mind. As waves crashed around them in 1977, Lucas pitched an idea that sounded insane: a globe-trotting archaeologist with a whip and a fedora, chasing biblical artifacts through snake-filled tombs. What made this beach conversation legendary wasn't just the idea, it was the pact they made. No studio interference, no corporate meddling, just pure creative freedom. They shook hands on creating something that felt like the Saturday matinee serials of their childhood, but with a budget and vision that could shake the world. From that single conversation in paradise, they unknowingly launched a franchise that would define adventure cinema for generations. But first, they had to survive making it. Number 19. Tom Selleck's Magnum P.I. disaster. Harrison Ford almost never became Indiana Jones, and the reason why will shock you. Spielberg's first choice was Tom Selleck, the charismatic star who seemed perfect for the role. Selleck had the look, the charm, and most importantly, he absolutely nailed the screen test. The studio was convinced, contracts were being prepared, and Selleck was already practicing with the whip, convinced he'd found his career-defining role. Then CBS destroyed everything with one phone call. They owned Selleck through his Magnum P.I. contract and refused to let him go, no matter how much he begged or how hard the studio negotiated. With just 3 weeks before filming, Raiders was left without its leading man, and panic set in. That's when desperation led them back to Harrison Ford, who had originally been dismissed as too much like Han Solo. Sometimes the greatest casting decisions aren't planned, they're born from absolute necessity and perfect timing. Number 18. Indiana was George Lucas's dog. The name Indiana Jones has become synonymous with adventure, but its origin story is surprisingly ordinary and completely adorable. George Lucas didn't pull the name from some ancient text or heroic legend. He named the character after his beloved Alaskan Malamute, a massive fluffy dog named Indiana, who had been Lucas's loyal companion for years. The dog was known around the Lucas household for being adventurous, fearless, and always getting into trouble, traits that would define the fictional archaeologist perfectly. What makes this even more incredible is how perfectly the name worked. Lucas originally wanted to call the character Indiana Smith, but Spielberg immediately shot it down, saying it sounded like an accountant, not an adventurer. The switch to Jones was instant and final, transforming a pet's name into one of cinema's most iconic character names. Years later, Lucas would cleverly reference this origin in The Last Crusade, revealing that Indy was named after the family dog, making the real-world inspiration part of the actual movie mythology. Number 17. The Great Tunisia Food Poisoning Epidemic. Tunisia in 1980 became a battlefield, but not the kind Spielberg expected. Within days of arriving to film the desert sequences, the entire cast and crew fell victim to a devastating outbreak of food poisoning. Harrison Ford was vomiting between takes, George Lucas could barely stand, and John Rhys Davies later admitted he actually soiled himself during a crucial scene. The local water, unfamiliar spices, and relentless heat created a perfect storm of intestinal chaos that brought production to its knees. But one man remained standing while everyone else collapsed: Steven Spielberg. His secret weapon wasn't medicine or superior immunity, it was hundreds of cans of SpaghettiOs shipped directly from America. While everyone else gambled on local cuisine, Spielberg ate the same canned pasta every single day, refusing to risk his stomach on anything exotic. As his crew suffered through the worst food poisoning of their lives, the director remained perfectly healthy, directing scenes while everyone else ran to the bathroom. It was the least glamorous decision that saved the movie. Number 16. The sword scene that never happened. The most famous scene in Raiders was never supposed to happen. In the dusty marketplace of Tunisia, an elaborate sword fight had been choreographed, with Indy facing off against a massive swordsman in what should have been an epic whip versus blade duel. The sequence had been rehearsed for weeks, with intricate moves and precise timing that would showcase both weapons in a deadly dance. But when cameras rolled, Harrison Ford was dying from dysentery, barely able to stand, let alone engage in complex fight choreography. Ford's solution was born from pure desperation and perfect character instincts. He pulled Spielberg aside and suggested something radical. What if Indy just shot the guy? Spielberg paused, considered it, and immediately realized it was genius. They rolled camera. The swordsman performed his intimidating routine, and Ford, sweating and exhausted, simply drew his revolver and fired. The crew erupted in laughter. The audience would later go wild, and what was meant to be a dramatic fight became one of cinema's greatest comedic moments, all because Harrison Ford couldn't hold his stomach. Number 15. Harrison Ford's crippling knee injury. Harrison Ford's commitment to authenticity nearly crippled him during the truck chase sequence. While performing one of the film's most dangerous stunts, Ford landed wrong after a jump and tore a ligament in his knee, causing immediate swelling and excruciating pain. The medical team suggested flying him back to London for proper surgery, which would have shut down production for weeks and cost millions. But Ford, embodying the same stubborn determination as his character, refused to quit. Instead, he wrapped the knee, took painkillers, and continued filming some of the movie's most physically demanding scenes. If you watch closely, you can actually see Ford favoring his injured leg and limping through several sequences. But he never broke character or asked for a break. That rough, exhausted, slightly desperate performance wasn't just acting, it was Ford pushing through genuine pain to deliver one of cinema's greatest action heroes. The injury became part of Indy's authenticity, making every step feel more real and dangerous. Number 14. Karen Allen's costume caught fire. The bar fight in Nepal was already dangerous enough with breaking bottles, flying fists, and choreographed chaos. But when Karen Allen's costume suddenly caught fire, the line between movie violence and real danger disappeared in seconds. During filming, a flame effect went wrong, and Allen's dress ignited, sending fire racing up her back while cameras continued rolling. For terrifying moments, nobody realized it wasn't part of the stunt. A quick-thinking crew member immediately tackled Allen and smothered the flames before serious injury occurred, but the incident shook everyone on set. The wild, desperate energy you see in Allen's performance during that sequence isn't just great acting, it's the adrenaline of someone who had just escaped being seriously burned. Spielberg decided to keep the take, meaning audiences witnessed the raw aftermath of a near disaster that could have ended Allen's career and possibly her life. Sometimes the most authentic moments in movies come from the most dangerous accidents. Number 13. The borrowed Nazi submarine. When Spielberg needed a Nazi submarine for Raiders, he didn't build one from scratch or rely on miniatures. Instead, he made one phone call that saved the production hundreds of thousands of dollars and months of construction time. The massive detailed U-boat used in the film was actually borrowed from another movie that had just wrapped production, Wolfgang Petersen's Das Boot. The submarine was sitting unused in a European studio, perfectly preserved and amazingly detailed. All Spielberg had to do was repaint some Nazi insignias, adjust a few details, and suddenly, Raiders had one of the most authentic-looking military props in cinema history. It was a perfect example of movie magic through pure practicality, where one war movie literally handed its weapons to another. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A German submarine from a German film about German submariners became the escape vehicle for an American archaeologist fighting Nazis. Sometimes the best movie magic comes from incredible timing and smart recycling. Number 12. 7,000 live snakes in the Well of Souls. When Spielberg decided the Well of Souls needed real snakes, he didn't mess around with rubber props or stop-motion effects. Truck after truck arrived at the Tunisian set, delivering over 7,000 live snakes that were dumped into the carefully constructed tomb set. Pythons, cobras, and dozens of other species slithered across the floor, while Harrison Ford and Karen Allen had to walk among them, acting terrified while being genuinely terrified. The most dangerous moment came when a cobra, irritated by the lights and activity, reared up and struck directly at Karen Allen during filming. Only a sheet of plexiglass, nearly invisible to cameras, saved her from a potentially fatal bite. If you watch the scene closely, you can actually see the reflection of the protective glass in the final cut, a permanent reminder of how close Allen came to disaster. The terror in her eyes isn't acting. It's the genuine fear of someone surrounded by thousands of real predators with only thin glass between her and death. Number 11. The Cobra and the Mirror Trick. The cobra that almost killed Karen Allen wasn't the only serpent causing problems on set. During another crucial scene, the massive cobra refused to cooperate, simply sitting motionless despite the animal handler's best efforts. They tried everything: food rewards, temperature changes, even audio cues, but the snake remained stubbornly still. Finally, someone discovered the trick that would create one of the film's most terrifying moments. They placed a mirror behind the camera, and when the cobra saw its own reflection, it immediately went into attack mode, flaring its hood and striking repeatedly at what it thought was a rival snake. The footage was so intense and frightening that Spielberg used it for the scene where the Ark begins to reveal its power. What audiences see as supernatural terror was actually a snake trying to fight its own reflection, fooled by one of the oldest tricks in animal training. Even the movie's supernatural elements had surprisingly natural origins. Number 10. Hidden Star Wars Easter eggs. George Lucas couldn't resist leaving his signature on Raiders, and he hid it in the most unexpected place possible. Deep in the Well of Souls, among authentic-looking hieroglyphs and ancient carvings, eagle-eyed fans can spot familiar droids from a galaxy far, far away. C-3PO and R2-D2 are carved into the wall, not as accidents or Easter eggs, but as deliberate nods from Lucas to his other cinematic universe. But the Star Wars connections didn't stop there. Earlier in the film, the airplane that transports Indy bears the designation OBCPO, a clever combination referencing both Obi-Wan Kenobi and C-3PO. These weren't just fan service, they were Lucas's way of connecting his mythologies, suggesting that whether you're wielding a lightsaber or a whip, you're part of the same grand tradition of heroes, adventures, and impossible quests. For Lucas, Raiders wasn't separate from Star Wars. It was part of the same DNA of storytelling that connected ancient temples to space operas. Number 9. The Fedora Engineering Marvel. The fedora became so iconic that losing it during a stunt would have been cinematic disaster, but keeping it on Harrison Ford's head during action sequences proved nearly impossible. Wind, explosions, fights, and chase scenes sent the hat flying constantly, threatening to break the visual continuity that made Indiana Jones instantly recognizable. The costume department's solution was ingenious engineering disguised as simple wardrobe. They modified the hat's interior with carefully placed elastic strips, tight enough to keep the fedora secure through jumps, punches, and even whip cracks, but subtle enough to be invisible on camera. The result was movie magic. In the final film, Indy's hat stays perfectly positioned during the boulder escape, the truck chase, and every death-defying stunt. What looked like incredible luck was actually meticulous design because everyone understood that if the hat fell off, the hero would disappear with it. Number 8. The Real Truck Drag Stunt. The truck chase scene that made audiences' hearts stop was real in ways that would terrify modern insurance companies. Harrison Ford didn't use a stunt double for the sequence where Indy is dragged beneath the moving truck, holding on for dear life while the desert floor scrapes past inches from his face. The stunt was inspired by a 1939 Western called Stagecoach, where legendary stuntman Yakima Canutt performed a similar drag sequence under a horse-drawn carriage. To make it possible, the crew dug a shallow trench beneath the road, just deep enough for Ford's body to pass through safely while the massive truck rumbled overhead. Ford wore a concealed harness, but everything else was real. The speed, the dust, the grinding metal, and the constant danger of miscalculation. For those terrifying seconds, Ford was literally inches from death, dragged behind a truck at high speed with no safety net except precise timing and incredible courage. The grit and desperation you see isn't special effects, it's Ford risking everything to create movie history. Number 7. Alfred Molina's spider-covered debut. Alfred Molina's very first scene in his very first movie required him to be covered in dozens of live tarantulas, and the experience nearly broke the young actor before his career began. Playing Satipo, Indy's treacherous guide, Molina had to walk calmly through the cave while spiders crawled across his back and shoulders. The animal handlers placed the spiders on his costume, cameras rolled, and absolutely nothing happened. The tarantulas just sat there, motionless and awkward. The problem, as the handlers explained, was that all the spiders were male, and males don't move much unless motivated, so they introduced one female spider to Molina's shoulder, and the reaction was immediate and chaotic. The male spiders went into a frenzy, fighting each other and scuttling across Molina's body in territorial rage. Throughout the chaos, Molina remained perfectly still, maintaining his performance while covered in dozens of battling arachnids. It was a trial by fire that would have broken most actors, but Molina emerged as a professional, and the scene became unforgettably creepy. Number 6. The face-melting PG rating battle. When the Ark opened and Nazi faces began melting in grotesque detail, parents across America realized they hadn't brought their children to a typical adventure movie. The face-melting sequence was so intense, so graphically horrifying, that it nearly cost Raiders its PG rating and family audience. Theater complaints flooded in. The MPAA reviewed the footage multiple times, and the studio held its breath, knowing that an R rating would kill the film's mass appeal. Somehow, through a combination of clever editing, the supernatural context, and probably pure luck, Raiders kept its PG rating by the slimmest possible margin. But the controversy didn't end there. The scene was so impactful, so genuinely disturbing, that it helped spark the national debate that would eventually create the PG-13 rating system. Raiders didn't just melt Nazi faces, it melted the boundaries of what family films could show, forever changing how movies are classified and who gets to see them. Number 5. The Nazi Monkey's Grape Trick. The disturbing image of a monkey giving a Nazi salute became one of Raiders' most unsettling moments, but creating it nearly drove the animal trainers insane. The little monkey, adorable in its tiny vest, absolutely refused to raise its paw on command, no matter what rewards or encouragements the handlers offered. They tried treats, signals, even temperature changes, but the stubborn animal wouldn't cooperate. For 3 straight days, production was held up by one defiant primate who seemed to understand exactly what they wanted him to do and was having none of it. The breakthrough came from pure desperation and accidental genius. Someone discovered that by dangling a single grape on nearly invisible fishing line just out of reach above the monkey's head, they could force it to reach upward repeatedly. It took dozens of takes and hours of patient manipulation, but they finally captured the perfect salute that would haunt audiences. What makes this even more disturbing is that the monkey's trainer later revealed the animal had been specifically chosen because it was naturally aggressive and territorial, making its Nazi salute feel genuinely menacing rather than cute. The scene was so effective that it sparked controversy even in 1981, with some theaters receiving complaints about the imagery, but Spielberg refused to cut it because he knew it perfectly captured the film's message about evil corrupting everything it touches. Number 4. The Boulder's Fake Thunder. The boulder chase that opens Raiders created one of cinema's most heart-pounding sounds, but that thunderous rumble wasn't actually stone rolling through a temple. Sound designer Ben Burtt, the same genius who created R2-D2's voice and lightsaber sounds, faced an impossible challenge. How do you make a lightweight fiberglass boulder sound like it weighs 10 tons and could crush a human being? Real stone rolling simply didn't create the dramatic, terrifying audio that the scene demanded, so Burtt embarked on one of the most creative sound experiments in film history. The solution was pure audio alchemy that took weeks to perfect. Burtt recorded a Honda Civic rolling slowly down different gravel roads, capturing the crunch and scrape of tires on stone. Then he layered in actual thunder recordings from violent storms, filtered through echo chambers to give it supernatural weight and presence. But the secret ingredient was adding the sound of bowling balls rolling down wooden lanes, which provided that deep, continuous rumble that gets into your chest and makes your heart race. The final mix was so convincing that audiences genuinely believed they were hearing 10 tons of ancient stone chasing Harrison Ford through a temple. That boulder wasn't just chasing Indy, it was chasing the audience straight into their seats, proving that sometimes the most realistic effects are completely fake. Number 3. The Sacred Ark Between Takes. Between takes, Spielberg treated the Ark of the Covenant prop with genuine reverence, ordering the crew to lock it away and forbidding casual handling or examination. He wanted everyone on set to feel the same awe and fear that the characters experienced, and the psychological effect was remarkable. Even the actors began feeling uncomfortable around the prop, as if something ancient and dangerous really was trapped inside. Harrison Ford admitted in interviews that he started having strange dreams about the Ark, and Karen Allen confessed she felt genuinely nervous whenever she had to approach it during filming. The prop itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, hand-carved and detailed with authentic Hebrew inscriptions that were researched by religious scholars. Spielberg insisted on using real gold leaf for the exterior, not just paint, because he believed the authenticity would translate through the camera. The psychological manipulation worked so well that when the Ark finally opens in the film's climax, the terror on the actors' faces is completely genuine. They had spent months being conditioned to fear this object, and when the moment came to face its supposed power, their performances captured real dread. That authentic tension translated directly to their performances, making the audience believe in the impossible power of what was essentially just an elaborate wooden box. Number 2. The Mississippi Kids shot-for-shot remake. 3 kids from Mississippi turned a childhood obsession into cinema legend when they decided to remake Raiders shot-for-shot using borrowed costumes, homemade sets, and a family video camera. Eric Zala, Chris Strompalos, and Jason Lamb spent 7 summers recreating nearly every scene, building cardboard temples, using fireworks for explosions, and recording dialogue on cassette tapes. When Spielberg finally saw their creation years later, he was so inspired that he helped fund the one scene they never finished, proving that the greatest adventure sometimes starts in your own backyard. Number 1. The Horse Sweat Jacket. When the costume department needed Indiana Jones's leather jacket to look authentically worn and weathered, they didn't just rough it up with sandpaper or artificial aging techniques. They dragged it behind a truck, scraped it with wire brushes, and then applied the final touch that made it legendary: actual horse sweat, collected, bottled, and rubbed deep into the leather. Every crease, every stain, every mark on that jacket told a story of adventures the audience never saw, making Harrison Ford look like he'd already lived through a dozen impossible quests before the movie even began. Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just made, it was forged through chaos, creativity, and countless near disasters that somehow combined into perfect movie magic. From Spielberg's canned pasta diet to Ford's genuine injuries, every behind-the-scenes disaster became part of the legend. These weren't just filmmaking challenges, they were the real adventures that created cinema's greatest adventurer. What other legendary films should we excavate next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more secrets from Hollywood's greatest treasures, because sometimes the real story is even more incredible than the movie.